Strengthening the new nation. In this unit of study, we'll see how the United States moved its government from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution of the United States. We'll also focus on the first administrations of Washington and John Adams. The Confederation Government. John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams and the future president, is credited with coining the term critical period. He used this term to discuss the importance of the years between the Treaty of Paris, 1783, and the Constitutional Convention, 1787. During this period, the nation was governed by the Articles of Confederation and state constitutions. Many at the time viewed political participation and leadership in the states as more important than the national level. During the critical period, debates emerged on how much power the national, state, and local governments should have, and where, when, and how their powers should overlap. A confederation is a loose alliance. In this case, the alliance was comprised of the 13 states that had declared independence from Britain in the Declaration of Independence. Once the Articles of Confederation were ratified, they immediately went into effect. This occurred during the American Revolution. Under the Articles, there was no executive branch of the government to oversee the coordination of the laws Congress passed. That was Congress's job. It was felt that having an executive branch was too much like having a king, and that was something the framers of the Articles wished to avoid. The Second Continental Congress would establish a government among the 13 states. Each state would have one equal vote. The government could declare war, sign treaties, borrow money, and establish a post office. The approvals of the Articles of Confederation went into effect on March of 1781. The Land Ordinance of 1785. Since Congress could not tax, the national government turned to one source of income that seemed inexhaustible: the land between the Mississippi River and the western boundaries of the original colonies. Previous laws passed by the Congress had stated that these lands would not be made into colonies, but be allowed to enter the Union as free states. With the passage of the Land Ordinance of 1785, one section in each township was set aside for education. As you can see in the grid system, that's number 16. There. And the whole thing was surveyed in grids for each of the territories. Land was reserved for veterans, and some sold at $1 per acre. This was written by Thomas Jefferson, and also there would be no slavery in the West. It created a grid system of surveys divided into townships of 6 square miles, 36 sections of 1 square mile each. One section in each township was set aside for education and was $1 per acre. One half was sold as complete units of a minimum of 640 acres, or one section. Because not many could afford to buy one section, arrangements were made for land companies to purchase sections and sell them off in smaller parcels. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Once a territory had established 5,000 men, they could elect an elected assembly, but the governor retained an absolute veto over its laws. The governor would be appointed by the president of the Congress. When the population of a territory reached 60,000, the people could request admission to the Union as a state on equal terms within the original 13 states, provided the new state adopted a Republican constitution. The Northwest Territory later formed the Midwestern states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. It also barred slavery from this territory, which meant that the 5 new states could enter the Union as free states rather than slave states. Now, the ceded territory was given up by the previous states, as you can see here that were shown previously in a different slide. This was key because Maryland would not go along with the Articles of Confederation. And at that time, you needed all 13 states. When all the states gave up their cession of land, Maryland would approve the Articles of Confederation.
The Articles of Confederation. The framers of the Articles had wanted a loose organization of states with more power than the central government. While this may have been a good idea when crafted, it was not long into practice that several problems emerged. Congress could not stop one state from raising taxes on imports, while another one lowered them to persuade new customers to their markets. The same thing occurred with money. Congress could not stop states from printing money to pay their debts. Many states printed freely, with nothing of value backing the money. Such reckless decisions led to inflation and made the paper money worthless. But we do see the strengths of the Articles of Confederation. They were able to win the war. They were able to secure a peace treaty with the Treaty of Paris of 1783, and we'll look into later establishing the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. The weakness is they could not collect taxes. They had to ask states to send them money. Each state was given one vote, regardless of the size of the population of the state. You needed 9 out of 13 states in order to pass a law, and there was no executive branch to enforce the law or judicial branch to interpret any kind of problems that might occur between the states. The gathering crisis, Shays' Rebellion. Shay and his followers demanded a more flexible monetary policy and the right to postpone paying taxes until the post-war agricultural depression had lifted. Massachusetts had not fallen victim to the desire to print substantial amounts of money, even though it had a high property and poll taxes, taxes allowing people to vote. As a result, farmers led by Daniel Shay, a former captain in the American Revolutionary Army, held courthouses in Massachusetts hostage to prevent the courts from foreclosing on their lands due to the lack of paper currency. Militiamen were sent in to put down the rebellion, and 4 farmers ended up being killed. Many have linked this rebellion to the death knell of the Articles of Confederation. The federal government needed to be stronger to prevent similar situations from occurring across the United States. By 1785, it was apparent that the Articles of Confederation needed to be strengthened, but a major stumbling point was that to amend them, unanimous support was needed in order to make an amendment. All 13 states, and usually the state that was the biggest pain in the neck, Rhode Island. In meetings at Washington's home at Mount Vernon in Virginia, and also again at Annapolis Convention, delegates met to discuss the future of the nation. Although the Annapolis Convention was a failure, Alexander Hamilton secured from a delegation a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to strengthen the federal government, but not the Articles of the United States. Creating the Constitution. The 52 delegates to the Constitutional Convention represented a broad spectrum of U.S. citizens, lawyers, farmers, college graduates, and merchants. Each had a belief that there was at least one area in which the Articles could do a better job. It was not long before these delegates were divided into 2 camps, one for the big states such as Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania, and the other for the small states such as Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Delaware. Missing, due to being on diplomatic business or abroad, were John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Thomas Paine. Sam Adams and John Hancock were not chosen as delegates from Massachusetts, and Patrick Henry of Virginia opposed any growth in federal government and would not participate. Madison was only 36 when he assumed a major role in drafting the Constitution. This miniature in 1783 is by Charles Wilson Peel. Drafting the Constitution. The delegates voted to conduct their meetings in secret and say nothing to the public about their discussions until their work was completed. George Washington was unanimously elected chairperson. Benjamin Franklin, the elder statesman at age 81, provided a calming and unifying influence. The work and fashion specific articles in the Constitution was directed by James Madison, who would be known as the father of the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, Devin Moore Morris, and John Dickinson. They will represent different states. These state convention leaders shared the common goal of wanting to strengthen the young nation. 2 plans would then emerge on how to form the new government, the Virginia and New Jersey plans. Under the Virginia plan, designed by James Madison, it called for a new national government with a bicameral legislature. That means two houses, an executive branch and a judiciary branch. The proposal of the Virginia delegation at the 1787 Constitutional Convention calling for a national legislature, which the states would be represented according to population. The national legislature would have an explicit power to veto or overrule laws passed by state legislatures. Under the New Jersey plan, William Patterson, the man you see in the painting there, proposed 9 resolutions that would retain the Confederation. Small states responded with the New Jersey plan that kept the one state, one vote rule of the Articles, but expanded the powers of Congress and the national government. Proposals of the New Jersey delegation at the 1787 Constitutional Convention for a strengthened national government in which all states would have equal representation in a unicameral legislature. Give Congress the power to tax and regulate foreign and interstate commerce. Congressional appointment for a plural executive with no veto power, and a Supreme Court. The Great Compromise. Roger Sherman of Connecticut came up with the Connecticut Plan or Great Compromise, the end result of the debate between the Virginia and New Jersey plan, which seemed to be going nowhere. The plan provided for a two-house Congress, which the Virginia plan called for. Each state would be given equal representation in the Senate, 2 senators, but in a larger body, the House of Representatives, each state would be representing according to the size of its population. Within the Constitution, the framers established a clear separation of powers so that one entity and the new government could not be lawmaker, law enforcer, and judge. This, they hope, would provide a system in which the nation would not be dominant by one branch of the government. The president is therefore charged with ensuring that all laws passed by Congress are enforced. He does not have the authority to create laws on his own. And the Constitution created only one court in the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, and established only one member on that court, the Chief Justice. This way, Congress can create as many courts underneath the Supreme Court as deemed necessary, and many place as many judges and justices in the position as it sees fit.
The first part of the Constitution is called the Preamble and tells what those founding fathers set out to do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
So this is the preamble that you just heard for the old schoolhouse rock song. It's pretty catchy. But when we're looking at the preamble, it's basically almost a thesis of what the Constitution is going to be about. So in order to form a more perfect union, the founding fathers and the framers knew that there wasn't a perfect union, but the Constitution gives it the ability to get to there. Establish justice, that's the Supreme Courts and the court system. Ensure domestic tranquility, to ensure that there's peace within the nation. Provide for the common defense, that there would be the purpose of a defense and military, but only for the defense really of the nation. Promote the general welfare doesn't mean welfare. What it means is to be able to pass a series of laws that would promote the economic prosperity of the nation. And since Adam Smith's view of capitalism was prevalent in 1776, this is how we see it written here. And to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, that is us who are living today. So we're going to now look at what's actually in the Constitution. The legislature. The House of Representatives was chosen every 2 years. To be a member of the House, you have to be at least 25 years of age. The power, the sole power that is only in the House of Representatives, is that this is where all tax bills start. They have the sole power of impeachment. That means to bring charges against those who've been elected to Congress. appointed by the federal courts and also President of the United States. And they elect a Speaker of the House. The second part of the House is the Senate, chosen every 6 years, 2 from each state. The minimum age was 30 years of age. Now, in the original form of the Constitution, it was the state legislatures that chose the 2 senators. The powers, they had the sole power to try all impeachments and also to ratify treaties and confirm appointments made by the president. Together, Congress makes the laws, they tax, raise armies, declare war, and coin money. The executive. The president is elected every 4 years, a maximum of 2 terms now, but there was not that placed in the original Constitution. They're elected by the Electoral College. Rather than having people elect a president directly, the delegates decide to assign to each state a number of electors equal to the total of that state's representatives and senators. The Electoral College system was instituted because delegacy in Philadelphia feared that too much democracy might lead to a mob rule. Also, that larger states would be able to dominate the smaller states, so the purpose was to protect the minority states. In order to be elected president, you had to be a natural born of 35 years of age. The powers of the president to execute, in a sense, the executive, enforce the laws passed by Congress. They're the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. They make appointments and treaties with the consent of the Senate, and they sign or veto bills which finally make bills of Congress the law. The judiciary, the Supreme Court, is composed of judges appointed by the president but confirmed by the Senate, and they're given lifetime tenures. The reason they were given lifetime tenures is because it was believed the Supreme Court wouldn't become political, to keep the politics out of it. And whenever there was a vacancy, the president would make an appointment. What I want to show you is in this bas-relief of the Supreme Court, right here in the middle. In the middle of the bas-relief, representing the great lawgivers of history, that is Moses holding the 10 Commandments. So much for about separation of church and state, huh? Even the issues of representation and taxation were impacted by slavery. Northern states that had abolished slavery, as well as states that retained it but had fewer slaves, argued that slaves should not count towards the state's population for purposes of congressional representation. Southern states, on the other hand, argued that the total population of the state, free and enslaved, should be counted. In the end, the desire for compromise and constitution to strengthen the national government was led to the drafting of the so-called Threefifths Compromise. This compromise held that only 3/5 of slaves, called all other persons in the Constitution, would count towards a state's population when determining congressional representation, but not for taxation. Duties would be determined by a simple majority vote in Congress, but export duties that are thought to hurt the South were forbidden. Congress would make no more laws regarding the slave trade for 20 years. That's the international slave trade. The fight for ratification. The convention was completed on September 17, 1789. Now it had to be submitted to the special state conventions for ratification. Once the Constitution was submitted to each state, 2 distinct camps emerged. The Federalists, which included Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, published essays arguing for the ratification. The Federalist Papers, as they became known, were a collection of 85 essays written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay, outlining arguments in support of ratification of the proposed Constitution. These documents were considered one of the best commentaries on the Constitution from the perspective of the Federalists at the time. The most famous of the Federalist Papers is Madison's essay number 10, which addressed a major concern that many over the size of the new nation and its ability to remain united across such a vast area of land. Madison first discussed one example of democracy from history, such as the city-states of Athens, concluding that democracies themselves are dangerous because the will of people usually becomes the rule of the majority or mob rule over a minority. And in the end, all these democracies end up being taken over by tyranny. Whereas some argue that these threats would undermine the new nation's existence, Madison asserted that the flaw inherent to democracy, the existence of factions or special interest groups that try to rule and work of the nation's favor. The group opposing the Constitution's ratification were the Anti-Federalists. Members such as Richard Henry Lee and Patrick Henry of Virginia were not as well organized in their rebuttals, but were still widely read. Arguments for ratification included standardized monetary supply, reduction of taxes, and repayment of the war bonds. Arguments against ratification included the fact that there was no Bill of Rights, this would be added in 1791, and that the Constitution provided a similar government system to Great Britain, to similar power struggles might follow, and that the ratification process was illegal under the Articles of Confederation. The assertion that the Constitution needed a Bill of Rights became the major argument of the Anti-Federalists against ratification. Once the Federalists realized that this was the biggest obstacle, some of them suggested that states with concerns about the absence of Bill of Rights ratify the Constitution with the caveat that the Bill of Rights would be added later. The states and the Constitution. The small states did not have as many vocal opponents to the Constitutions as the larger states. However, without New York and Virginia ratifying the new government would be just a shell. Once they did it, it was a fait accompli. The new government was formed and the old was disbanded. New York was chosen as the site of the first capital. But was it necessary for the people's right to be listed in the Constitution? In the early months of the ratification debates, Anti-Federalists argued vehemently in favor of the Bill of Rights, while Federalists argued against it. Anti-Federalists argued as fellow Americans had fought the Revolutionary War to escape the tyranny of a central government in Britain, what was the start of a strong central government under the Constitution from acting in a tyrannical manner. Only by adding a Bill of Rights could Americans be protected against its possibility. Federalists argued as follows: since members of Congress would be elected by the people, they need not to be protected against themselves. Furthermore, it was better to assume that all rights were protected than to create a limited list of rights, since unscrupulous officials could then assert their own unlisted rights could be violated at will. But in order to win ratification, the Federalists, as the first order of business of the newly elected Congress, the promise of Bill of Rights was also made. States were most likely to ratify it.